The snow had barely stopped falling when I heard the screaming from my driveway, and I knew immediately that my quiet Saturday morning in Burlington, Vermont, was about to turn into something memorable. I was standing there with my snow blower, clearing the path that connected my property to the main road. The machine had been churning through 2 feet of fresh powder for the past hour, and I'd been systematically pushing the snow to the side, creating neat banks along what everyone in the neighborhood called the shared path. Except it wasn't shared. Not legally, anyway. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The voice cut through the winter air like a knife, shrill and furious. I looked up to see Brenda Patterson marching toward me, her face already red despite the cold. She was bundled in a designer parka that probably cost more than my snow blower, and her blonde highlights were perfect despite the weather. She'd been the HOA president for the past 3 years, and in that time, she'd made it her personal mission to make everyone's life miserable. I shut off the snow blower, mostly so I could hear whatever nonsense was about to come out of her mouth. "Morning, Brenda, just clearing my path." "Your path?" Her voice went up an octave. "That's a shared community path. You can't just blow snow all over it like that. Look at this mess." She gestured wildly at the neat banks of snow I'd created on either side. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, though I'd hoped it would come under better circumstances. "Actually, Brenda, it's not a shared path. It's my private property." Her face went from red to purple. "That's ridiculous. Everyone uses that path. It's been a community access point for 20 years. Doesn't make it community property," I said calmly. I'd had my property surveyed 3 months ago, right after she'd sent me a violation notice for parking my truck too close to the community path. That survey had revealed something interesting, something that my predecessor, old Mr. Henderson, had apparently never bothered to check, or maybe he'd just been too kind to enforce. "I'm going to have you fined for this," Brenda sputtered. "You can't block community access." "It's in the HOA bylaws." "The bylaws can't supersede property law," I replied. "And like I said, this is my property. The entire path from where it connects to Maple Street all the way to where it meets the main road runs through my land. My property line extends 20 feet beyond where everyone thinks it does." I pulled out my phone and showed her the survey documents I'd scanned. She snatched the phone from my hand, her eyes darting across the screen. I watched as the reality slowly dawned on her. The color drained from her face, then came rushing back even darker than before. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This can't be right." "It's right. I had it verified by 2 separate surveyors and confirmed with the county. That path everyone's been using. It's an easement that expired 15 years ago when Henderson owned the place. He just never bothered to revoke access because he was a nice guy. I'm not quite as nice." That last part wasn't entirely true. I'd been planning to let things continue as they were, despite knowing about the property line issue. But then Brenda had gone too far. First, it was the parking violation that cost me $300. Then she'd reported me to code enforcement for having my trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day, even though they'd been out because the collection company had missed my house and was coming back. Then, there was the incident with my girlfriend's car. Mira Zimmerman had been staying with me for a few weeks while her apartment was being renovated. She'd parked her car in my driveway, but apparently it was sticking out about 6 inches past some invisible line that Brenda had decided was the boundary. She'd had Mira's car towed at 7 in the morning on a Sunday. Cost Mira $400 to get it back, plus the trauma of waking up to find her car gone. That had been the final straw for me. I'd gotten the property surveyed, discovered the truth about the path, and started planning. I'd consulted with a property attorney named Rebecca Hollies, who'd practically danced with joy when I showed her the survey results. "You understand what this means," Rebecca had said in her office downtown. "You own the only practical access point for 12 houses in that development. They'd have to drive an extra 2 miles around if you revoked access, and since the easement expired, you have every legal right to do so." I hadn't been sure I wanted to go that far, but now, standing in the cold with Brenda screaming at me, I was feeling pretty good about my options. "You can't do this," Brenda shrieked. "I'll sue you. The HOA will bury you in legal fees." "The HOA can try," I said. "But according to my attorney, you don't have a leg to stand on. That easement expired in 2009 and nobody renewed it. Mr. Henderson let everyone keep using the path out of kindness, not obligation. I'm under no such obligation. But everyone uses that path. The Johnsons, the Martins, the Carters, they all need it to get to their homes. They can use Riverside Drive and come in the back way," I said. "Adds about 4 minutes to the drive, not the end of the world." Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You're doing this because of the towing, aren't you? That was a legitimate violation. It was 6 inches, Brenda. 6 inches. And you had her car towed without warning, without a notice, nothing. You just did it because you could. Rules are rules." "You're right," I said. "Rules are rules. And the rule here is that this is my property and I get to decide who uses it." Effective immediately, the HOA and its members no longer have access to this path. I fired up the snow blower again, drowning out whatever she was screaming at me. I finished clearing my section, made sure the path to my house was perfect, and then I put the snow blower away. When I came back out, Brenda was gone, but I could see her through the window of her house, on the phone, gesturing wildly. Let her call whoever she wants, I thought. This was going to be interesting. The rest of Saturday was quiet, deceptively so. I spent the afternoon inside with Mira, who'd come home from her shift at the hospital to find me in an unusually good mood. "You told her?" Mira asked, settling onto the couch with a cup of tea. Her dark hair was still damp from her shower, and she looked exhausted. Nursing shifts at the University of Vermont Medical Center were brutal, especially in winter when accidents and illnesses surged. "I told her," I confirmed. "Showed her the survey and everything." "How'd she take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Lots of screaming, threats of lawsuits, the usual Brenda Patterson special." Mira shook her head. "I still can't believe she had my car towed. $400, Henry. $400 because I was parked 6 inches over some arbitrary line." Henry Dawson, that was me. 34 years old, software engineer working remotely for a company based in Boston, and apparently now the proud owner of the most contested piece of land in our HOA. I'd bought the house 2 years ago, attracted by the quiet neighborhood and the reasonable price. The HOA had seemed manageable at first, just the usual stuff about lawn maintenance and exterior paint colors. But then Brenda had been elected president, and everything changed. "She's probably calling an emergency HOA meeting right now," I said. "Can they do anything?" "According to Rebecca, no. The property is mine. The easement expired. They have no legal right to force me to provide access. But they'll try anyway." "Oh, absolutely. But trying and succeeding are 2 different things." I was right about the emergency meeting. By Sunday morning, there was a notice taped to every door in the neighborhood. "Emergency HOA meeting, Sunday 7 p.m. Community Center. Attendance mandatory. Topic: property access rights." The community center was just a fancy name for the converted garage behind the Johnsons' house. It had space for about 30 people if everyone liked each other, which we didn't. I arrived at 7 sharp with Rebecca Hollies by my side. I'd asked her to come as my legal representation, and she'd agreed, probably because she knew this was going to be entertaining. The room was packed. Every homeowner in the affected section was there, along with several others who'd come just to watch the drama. Brenda stood at the front, looking like she'd dressed for court. She had a stack of papers in front of her and a laptop connected to a projector. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice icy. "We're here to discuss a serious threat to our community. Henry Dawson has decided to revoke access to the community path, which would severely impact 12 families." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw my neighbors looking at me, some confused, others angry. The Johnsons, an elderly couple who'd lived here for 30 years, looked particularly distressed. "I'd like to present the facts," Brenda continued. She clicked her remote and a map appeared on the screen. It showed the neighborhood layout, with the disputed path highlighted in red. "This path has been used by our community for decades. It's essential for access to 12 homes, including those of the Johnsons, the Martins, the Carters, and others. Without it, residents would have to take a significant detour, adding time and wear to their vehicles." She clicked again, and another image appeared. It was the old property survey from when Henderson had owned my house, the one that incorrectly showed the path as community property. "According to previous surveys, this path has always been considered shared space." "Previous surveys were wrong," I said, standing up. "Which is why I had new ones done." Brenda glared at me. "You had no right to disrupt community access." "I have every right to control my own property," I replied. Rebecca stood up beside me. "Rebecca Hollies, attorney at law," she said, handing out copies of the new survey to the people around us. "My client had the property professionally surveyed by 2 independent companies. Both confirmed that the path in question lies entirely within his property boundaries. Furthermore, the easement that previously granted access expired in 2009 and was never renewed." "That can't be legal," someone shouted from the back. I recognized Tom Martin, a guy about my age who worked in finance and always seemed to be in a hurry. "It's completely legal," Rebecca said. "Easements don't renew automatically. The previous owner allowed continued use out of courtesy, not legal obligation. Mr. Dawson is under no such obligation." "This is revenge," Brenda snapped. "He's doing this because I enforced HOA rules." "You towed my girlfriend's car for being 6 inches over a line," I said. "Without warning, without notice. You charged me $300 for parking violations that were questionable at best. You've harassed me since I moved in. So yes, maybe I'm less inclined to be generous than Henderson was." "That's abuse of property rights," someone else shouted. Rebecca shook her head. "Actually, it's the exercise of property rights. Mr. Dawson owns the land. He decides who uses it. That's how property law works." The meeting devolved into chaos. Everyone started talking at once, shouting questions and accusations. The Johnsons looked like they were about to cry. Mr. Johnson stood up shakily. "Henry," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the room, "please. We've lived here for 30 years. That path is the only easy way to our home. I have a heart condition. The extra drive, the stress, it's hard on me." I felt a twinge of guilt. The Johnsons were good people. They'd never been anything but kind to me. They'd brought me cookies when I moved in, helped me figure out which contractor to use for my roof repair. This wasn't about them. "Mr. Johnson," I said carefully, "I'm not trying to hurt you or anyone else who's been decent to me. This is about the HOA's abuse of power. It's about Brenda using her position to harass people over petty violations while ignoring real problems." "Then be the bigger person," Mrs. Johnson said. Don't punish all of us for her mistakes. Brenda seized on this. Exactly. This is collective punishment. It's wrong. You know what else is collective punishment, I said. Charging people hundreds of dollars for minor violations, towing cars without warning, creating an environment where people are afraid to park in their own driveways because you might decide they're slightly over some invisible line. I enforce the rules fairly. You enforce them selectively, I shot back. Your own car has been parked half on the street for weeks. Your fence is 3 inches taller than the bylaws allow. Your house number isn't illuminated as required by code. But you never fine yourself, do you? The room went quiet. Several people were nodding. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed Brenda's selective enforcement. That's slander, Brenda hissed. It's observation, I said. And it's documented. I've been keeping records since you started targeting me. Rebecca stepped in. Perhaps we can discuss a compromise. Mr. Dawson is willing to negotiate access rights but not under the current HOA structure. What does that mean? Tom Martin asked. It means I'll grant easements to individual homeowners, I said. Personal agreements in writing that allow specific people to use the path, but not the HOA. The HOA gets nothing. You can't exclude the HOA from community property, Brenda shrieked. It's not community property, I said, raising my voice for the first time. It's my property, and I can exclude whoever I want. In fact, Brenda, I'm specifically excluding you. You and any vehicle you own or operate are banned from using that path, effective immediately. The room erupted again. Brenda's face went through several colors. You can't do that. I absolutely can, Rebecca confirmed. It's his property. He can restrict access to anyone for any reason as long as it's not based on protected class discrimination. This is discrimination. Against what? Annoying HOA presidents. That's not a protected class. Several people actually laughed at that, which made Brenda even angrier. She started shuffling through her papers frantically. I'll find a legal basis to fight this. There has to be something. There isn't, Rebecca said. I've already reviewed all the relevant laws and the HOA bylaws. The bylaws mention the path, but they don't create any legal right to it. They were written assuming the easement was permanent, which it wasn't. Then we'll establish a new easement, Tom Martin said. We'll go through whatever legal process is necessary. That requires the property owner's consent, Rebecca said, which Mr. Dawson is not obligated to provide. But he's willing to negotiate individual agreements, Mrs. Johnson asked hopefully. I nodded. For reasonable people, yes. People who have been good neighbors, who haven't harassed me or used their HOA position to make my life difficult. I'll work with those people. And what are your terms? Tom asked. That depends. But generally, a signed easement agreement, probably some nominal annual fee to cover maintenance and my property tax increase, and an agreement that you won't support any HOA action against me. That's extortion, Brenda shouted. It's negotiation, Rebecca corrected, and it's perfectly legal. Mr. Dawson is offering access to his private property in exchange for reasonable terms. Anyone who doesn't like the terms can use the alternate route. The alternate route adds 20 minutes, someone complained. Actually, it adds about 4 minutes, I said. I drove it. Riverside Drive connects to Mountain View, which takes you right to the back entrance of the development. It's longer, but not dramatically so. 4 minutes each way, Tom calculated. That's 8 minutes a day, 40 minutes a week. That's time and gas money. Then negotiate with me, I said. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm just not letting the HOA or certain individuals use my property for free while they fine me for nonsense. The meeting continued for another hour. People argued, debated, and tried to find loopholes. Rebecca shut down every legal argument they made. Eventually, people started to leave frustrated and confused. The Johnsons approached me before they left. "Henry," Mr. Johnson said, "I understand you're angry, but please can we work something out? My wife and I, we really need that access." "Come by my house tomorrow," I said. "Bring your current property deed and documentation. We'll draft an easement agreement. For you two, no annual fee. You've been nothing but kind to me." Mrs. Johnson looked like she might cry from relief. Thank you so much." They left, and a few others approached with similar requests. I told them all the same thing. "Come by, we'll talk, we'll work something out." But not Brenda. She stood at the front of the room, surrounded by her stack of papers, looking defeated and furious at the same time. "This isn't over," she said as I walked past. "I'll find a way to fight this." "Good luck with that," I said. "My lawyer's already researched every angle. You have no legal standing." Rebecca and I left together. Outside, the night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from Burlington proper. "That went well," Rebecca said with a slight smile. "You think so? You stood your ground, you offered reasonable compromises to reasonable people, and you didn't back down to the bully. I'd call that a win. Brenda's not going to let this go. No, she's not. Which is why you need to be prepared. Document everything. Every interaction, every agreement, everything. If she tries anything, we need evidence." I nodded. "I've already been documenting her violations. I've got photos, timestamps, everything." "Good. Keep it up. And let me review any easement agreements before you sign them. We need to make sure they're legally sound." Over the next week, I had a parade of neighbors coming to my door. The Johnsons were first, and I drafted them a simple easement agreement that granted them permanent access to the path at no cost. They signed it with visible relief. The Martins came next. Tom Martin was all business, wanting to review every clause and negotiate every term. I didn't mind. We settled on an annual fee of $200, which worked out to less than $4 a week. He grumbled but agreed. The Carters, a young couple with 2 small kids, came by nervously. They explained that they were just starting out, money was tight, and the longer commute would mean extra daycare costs because they'd have to drop the kids off earlier. "What if you do maintenance on the path?" I suggested. "Snow removal in winter, filling potholes in summer. In exchange, I'll waive the annual fee." They jumped at that offer. We drafted an agreement, they signed it, and they left happy. One by one, I worked through the affected homeowners. Some negotiations were easy, others took several meetings. But by the end of the week, I had agreements with 10 of the 12 affected properties. The only holdouts were Brenda Patterson and Richard Sullivan, who was Brenda's next-door neighbor and her most loyal supporter on the HOA board. Brenda tried calling me several times. I didn't answer. She sent emails, which I forwarded to Rebecca without responding. She even showed up at my door one evening trying to be sweet and conciliatory, offering to work together to find a solution. "The solution is simple," I told her through the screen door. "You resign as HOA president, you refund every penny you've extracted from me in bogus fines, and you apologize to Mira for having her car towed." "That's ridiculous," she said, the sweetness evaporating. "I'm not resigning. This community needs strong leadership." "Then you're not using my path." "Neither is Richard, since he's your puppet. You're punishing him for being my friend. I'm choosing not to do business with people I don't trust. That's my right." She left angry, and things escalated from there. The next morning, I woke up to find orange spray paint on my driveway. Someone had written "property thief" in large letters across the concrete. I took photos immediately and called the police. Officer James Mitchell came out to take the report. He was a local cop I'd seen around, always professional and thorough. He examined the spray paint, took photos of his own, and asked if I had any security cameras. "Not yet," I said, "but I'm installing them today." "Good idea. You have any idea who might have done this?" "I have suspicions," I said, and I explained the whole situation. The property line, the easements, the HOA conflict. Mitchell whistled low. "That's quite a mess. But vandalism's vandalism, no matter the reason. We'll investigate. Can you check with the hardware stores? See who bought orange spray paint recently? We can do that. Also, I'd recommend getting those cameras up soon. If this escalates, you'll want footage." I spent that afternoon installing a comprehensive security system. 4 cameras covering all angles of my property, including the disputed path. Motion-activated night vision, the works. The system uploaded footage to the cloud automatically, so even if someone destroyed the cameras, the evidence would be safe. Good timing, too. That night, around 2 in the morning, the motion sensors triggered. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed. 2 figures in dark clothing were approaching my property, carrying what looked like paint cans. I called 911. "I have trespassers on my property, caught on camera. Looks like they're about to commit vandalism." The dispatcher was efficient. "Address," I gave it to her. "I can see them on my security cameras. They're at the entrance to my path now. One's shaking a spray paint can. Officers are on the way. Stay inside, keep the doors locked." I watched the feed. The 2 figures moved toward my house, then one of them pointed at something. The new camera, probably. They seemed to argue for a moment, then turned to leave. But by then, it was too late. Red and blue lights flashed on the feed and 2 police cars pulled up, blocking their exit. I went downstairs and opened my front door, staying inside as instructed but watching the scene unfold. The officers had both figures on the ground, handcuffing them. I recognized one of them even from a distance, Richard Sullivan. The other one I didn't know, probably some friend he'd recruited. Officer Mitchell saw me at the door and walked over after his partner secured the suspects. "Mr. Dawson, looks like we caught them in the act." "I've got it all on video," I said. "Multiple angles. I can send you the files. That'd be helpful." "We found spray paint cans on them, same color as what's on your driveway. They're going to be charged with trespassing, attempted vandalism, and conspiracy to commit vandalism. One of them is Richard Sullivan. He's on the HOA board." Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "That right?" "Well, that's not going to look good for him, or the HOA." They took Richard and his friend away in separate cars. I sent the video files to Mitchell's email, then tried to get some sleep. Mira had slept through the whole thing, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital. I didn't wake her. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Richard Sullivan had been arrested trying to vandalize my property. The HOA's reputation, already shaky, took a nosedive. Several homeowners started questioning whether they wanted to be part of an organization whose board members committed crimes. Brenda tried to distance herself from Richard's actions. She sent out an email to all HOA members condemning vandalism and saying that Richard had acted alone without HOA authorization. But nobody believed her. Richard and Brenda were too close. Everyone knew they coordinated on everything. Then things got worse for Brenda. One of the other homeowners, Jennifer Garcia, requested a formal audit of the HOA's finances. She'd been suspicious for a while, she said, about how the association's money was being spent. The bylaws required an audit if requested by 10% of homeowners, so Jennifer got signatures and submitted the request. Brenda fought it, claiming an audit was unnecessary and expensive. But the bylaws were clear, and eventually, she had to comply. An independent accounting firm was hired to review the HOA's books. I wasn't part of that process, being focused on my own situation, but I heard about it from neighbors. The Carters, who'd agreed to do maintenance in exchange for path access, told me they'd heard rumors that Brenda had been using HOA funds for personal expenses. The Martins mentioned that several community improvement projects Brenda had approved seemed to benefit her property more than anyone else's. While that investigation was ongoing, I had to deal with the criminal case against Richard Sullivan. The prosecutor's office contacted me, asking if I'd be willing to testify. I agreed. They also asked for the full video footage, which I provided. Richard initially tried to claim he was just walking through the neighborhood and hadn't planned to vandalize anything. But the video was clear. He and his friend had approached my property with spray paint cans, shaken them, and been pointing them at my house when the police arrived. The prosecutor said it was one of the easiest cases she'd had. Richard ended up pleading guilty to attempted vandalism and trespassing. He got a fine, probation, and community service. More importantly for me, the judge issued a restraining order keeping him off my property. When Richard realized this meant he definitely couldn't use the path, he tried to argue that it would prevent him from accessing his home. The judge was unsympathetic. "You should have thought of that before you tried to vandalize Mr. Dawson's property," she said. "You'll have to use the alternate route." Richard's face went red, but there was nothing he could do. He left the courthouse looking defeated. The HOA audit results came back in early March, just as the snow was starting to melt. They were damning. Brenda had been using HOA funds to pay for landscaping at her own property, charging personal meals to the HOA credit card, and even using association money to pay for a vacation she'd claimed was for HOA education purposes. In total, she'd misappropriated about $15,000 over 3 years. Jennifer Garcia called another emergency meeting. This one, Brenda wasn't running. She sat in the audience, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, while Jennifer presented the audit results. "This is theft," Jennifer said bluntly. "Brenda Patterson has been stealing from all of us. The accounting firm has referred this to the local prosecutor, and I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove her as HOA president." The vote was unanimous among everyone except Brenda herself, who abstained. She was out, effective immediately. Jennifer was elected interim president until a proper election could be held. After the meeting, Brenda tried to approach me in the parking lot. "Henry, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm going to pay the money back. Don't let them prosecute me." "That's not up to me," I said. "You committed crimes. That's between you and the legal system. I'll lose everything. My reputation, my position in the community. You should have thought of that before you embezzled $15,000 and before you made my life hell for the past 2 years. I was just trying to maintain community standards. You were abusing your power. There's a difference." She started crying, but I didn't feel sympathy. I'd seen her reduce other people to tears with her arbitrary enforcement and petty cruelty. This was justice, not tragedy. The prosecutor did move forward with charges: embezzlement, theft, fraud. Brenda hired an expensive lawyer who tried to argue that she'd made accounting errors, not intentional theft. But the audit showed a clear pattern: charges to her property, personal expenses, the vacation. It was systematic, not accidental. In May, she pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of misappropriation of funds. She was sentenced to 90 days in county jail, suspended, meaning she'd only serve it if she violated probation. She also had to pay full restitution, plus fines and court costs. The total came to about $30,000. She put her house up for sale a week later. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood had gotten better. Jennifer Garcia proved to be a reasonable HOA president. One of her first acts was to review all the recent violations and fines. She found that Brenda had issued nearly 50 violations in the past year, most of them petty and many of them questionable. "I'm recommending we void most of these," Jennifer said at a meeting. They were clearly retaliatory or based on overly strict interpretations of the rules. "If anyone paid fines that shouldn't have been issued, file a claim with the HOA. We'll refund you." I filed for my $300 in parking fines. Mira filed for her $400 in towing costs. Both were approved without question. The path situation settled into a comfortable routine. The 10 homeowners who'd signed easement agreements had legal access. They paid their fees or did their maintenance work as agreed. The path stayed clear and well-maintained, probably better than it had been under HOA management. Richard Sullivan, still unable to use the path because of the restraining order, had to take the long way around every day. I'd see him sometimes, driving past on the main road, glaring at my property. He tried appealing the restraining order after completing his community service, but the judge had denied it. "Actions have consequences," she'd said. "Maybe the extra drive will give you time to reflect on your choices." As for Brenda, she completed her community service at a local food bank. I saw her there once when I was dropping off donations. She saw me too and quickly looked away, focusing intently on sorting canned goods. She looked tired, older somehow, diminished. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I just felt relieved that her reign of terror was over. Her house sold in June. A nice couple from Boston bought it, relocating for work. They came to introduce themselves shortly after moving in, and I mentioned the path situation right away, wanting to be upfront about it. "We heard about that," the husband said, laughing. "The whole neighborhood told us. Sounds like the previous owner had it coming." "I can draw up an easement agreement for you if you want path access," I offered. "That'd be great. What are your terms?" We negotiated something reasonable. They seemed like good people, and I had no reason to make their lives difficult. They weren't responsible for Brenda's actions. By summer, everything had settled into a new normal. The HOA was functioning properly under Jennifer's leadership, with transparent finances and reasonable enforcement of rules. The path was well-maintained and accessible to those who'd earned that access through decent behavior and signed agreements. And I finally felt comfortable in my own home, not constantly worried about what petty violation I'd be charged with next. Mira moved in with me permanently in July. Her apartment renovation had finished months ago, but she'd never moved back. "Why would I?" she said. "This feels like home now." We were sitting on the back deck one evening in early August, watching the sun set over the Green Mountains, when she brought up something that had been on my mind too. "Do you ever regret how you handled things?" she asked. "With Brenda and the path," I thought about it. "Sometimes I wonder if I could have been less harsh. But then, I remember her having your car towed. I remember the look on your face when you came back inside after spending $400 to get it back. I remember how stressed I was every time I came home, worried about what new violation notice would be on my door." "She brought it on herself," Mira said. "She did. And honestly, I think revoking her access was fair. I offered reasonable terms to everyone else. She just couldn't accept that she wasn't in control anymore. Jennifer's doing a good job as president. She is. The HOA feels like what it's supposed to be now. An organization that maintains common areas and handles shared concerns, not a power trip for whoever's in charge." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Mira said, "I'm glad you stood up to her. A lot of people would have just taken the abuse." "I'm stubborn," I admitted. "Always have been. My dad used to say it was my best and worst quality. In this case, it was definitely your best. The next morning, I went out to check on the path. It had become part of my routine, a quick walk to make sure everything was in order. I found Mr. Johnson out there, sweeping away some debris from a storm the night before. "Morning, Henry," he called. "Thought I'd help keep things tidy." "You don't have to do that," I said. "Your easement doesn't require maintenance. I know. But you've been good to us. Fair when you didn't have to be. Least I can do is pitch in." We talked for a few minutes about his grandkids who were visiting for the summer, about how his heart was doing better now that his doctor had adjusted his medication, about how grateful he and his wife were that they didn't have to take the long route every day. "You know," he said as he prepared to leave, "Henderson was a good man. But you're a good man too, just in a different way. He kept the peace by letting people walk over him. You keep the peace by setting boundaries and sticking to them. Both approaches have their place." That stuck with me. I'd been thinking of myself as less generous than Henderson, less community-minded. But Mr. Johnson was right. Henderson's kindness had let Brenda's abuse go unchecked for years. My boundaries had finally stopped it. The community had actually improved since the whole conflict. The HOA was better run, more transparent, more responsive to actual community needs rather than one person's power trips. People were friendlier, less worried about arbitrary enforcement of petty rules. The neighborhood felt more like a community and less like a police state. In September, Jennifer organized a neighborhood barbecue. It was the first community event in over a year, Brenda having canceled the previous ones claiming budget concerns. Turned out she'd been skimming money from the community events fund too. Everyone came, including the new family in Brenda's old house. We ate burgers and corn on the cob. Kids ran around playing, and adults actually talked to each other without the underlying tension that had defined interactions during Brenda's presidency. Tom Martin approached me with a beer in hand. "I owe you an apology," he said. "When this whole thing started, I thought you were being petty and vindictive, but seeing how things have turned out, you were right. Brenda needed to be stopped and nobody else was willing to do it." "I appreciate that," I said. "And for what it's worth, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted the harassment to stop." "Well, it stopped, and we all benefited. The HOA actually works now." As the sun set and the barbecue wound down, I looked around at my neighbors. People were laughing, relaxed, enjoying themselves. The community felt healthy in a way it hadn't in years. Mira found me standing at the edge of the gathering, observing. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How much can change in a few months," I said. "Last winter, I was miserable every time I came home. Now it actually feels like home." "Because you fought for it. Because I set boundaries and enforced them. Same thing, really." The fall brought cooler weather and beautiful foliage. Vermont was stunning in autumn, the mountains painted in reds and golds. Tourists came through Burlington in droves, and the local economy boomed like it always did this time of year. I got a call from Rebecca Hollies in October. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Brenda Patterson completed her probation early. Good behavior, full restitution paid. Good for her, I guess. Also, she's moving. Out of state, apparently. Florida, I heard. Can't say I'll miss her." "No, I imagine not. But I wanted you to know in case she tries to contact you. She might want to make amends or something. She didn't, though." Brenda left quietly, and that was the end of it. The new owners of her house integrated seamlessly into the neighborhood. The path remained clear and accessible to those with easement agreements. Life went on. In November, I got an interesting piece of mail. It was from the county assessor's office, and it was about my property taxes. Given that the path had been officially recognized as part of my property, and given that I was now maintaining it and granting easements, I was eligible for a slight reduction in my residential tax rate, and a reclassification that actually saved me about $800 a year. So standing up for yourself actually made you money, Mira observed when I showed her the letter. Not exactly. The easement fees cover that and then some, but it's nice to know the county recognizes the situation. Are you going to keep granting easements? To reasonable people, yes. Anyone who moves into the affected houses and acts like a decent human being can have access. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just won't be pushed around anymore. That had become my philosophy, not just about the path but about life in general. I'd spent too many years being accommodating, avoiding conflict, letting people take advantage. The situation with Brenda had taught me that boundaries weren't cruel, they were necessary. That standing up for yourself wasn't selfish, it was self-respect. Christmas came and the neighborhood looked like a postcard. Snow on the roofs, lights on the houses, wreaths on the doors. Jennifer organized a holiday party at the community center, and this time everyone came. Even Richard Sullivan showed up, though he avoided me carefully. I was talking with the Carters about their plans for Christmas when Richard finally approached. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Henry," he said, "I wanted to apologize for the vandalism attempt, for everything. I was following Brenda's lead and I shouldn't have. She was angry and she convinced me you were the enemy. I was wrong." I studied him. He seemed sincere, not just trying to manipulate me into lifting the restraining order. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "I know the restraining order runs for another 6 months. When it expires, would you consider an easement agreement? I'll pay whatever you think is fair. The long drive is really wearing on me." "Let's talk when the restraining order expires," I said. "If you've stayed out of trouble and you're willing to sign a proper agreement, we can work something out." He nodded, looking relieved. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve your consideration, but thank you." After he left, Mira squeezed my hand. "That was generous of you," he apologized. "Actually seemed to mean it, and he did his time, paid his fine. People deserve second chances." Not Brenda, though. Brenda never apologized, never acknowledged what she did was wrong. She just got mad that she faced consequences. That's different from someone who owns their mistakes and tries to make amends. As we drove home that night, past the path that had caused so much conflict, I felt at peace. The long fight was over. Justice had been served, not perfectly but adequately. The community was better for it, and I'd learned something important about standing up for myself. The new year brought fresh snow and new beginnings. Jennifer announced she'd be running for HOA president officially, not just serving as interim. Nobody ran against her. The election was unanimous. One of her first acts as official president was to revise the HOA bylaws. The new version included specific limits on the president's authority, required monthly transparent financial reporting, and established a clear appeals process for violations. It also included language about respecting property rights and not overreaching into private affairs. "These changes are partially inspired by recent events," Jennifer said at the meeting where the new bylaws were adopted. "We need to make sure what happened with the previous administration never happens again." Everyone agreed. The new bylaws passed unanimously. In February, a year after the initial confrontation with Brenda in my driveway, I found myself in almost the same spot, clearing snow with my snow blower. But this time, when I pushed the snow to the sides of the path, nobody screamed at me. Mr. Carter actually came out to help, using his own snow blower to clear his section. "Beautiful day for it," he called over the noise of the machines. "Sure is," I agreed. We finished together, then stood admiring our work. The path was clear, the snow banks neat and even. The morning sun made the fresh snow sparkle like diamonds. "You know," Carter said, When we first moved here, we thought the HOA was going to be a nightmare. We'd heard horror stories from friends in other neighborhoods. Then we got here right in the middle of your fight with Brenda, and we thought we'd made a terrible mistake. But it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. You fixed the HOA by breaking it first. Now it actually works the way it's supposed to. I just wanted to be left alone, I said. Sometimes wanting to be left alone is the most radical thing you can do, especially when someone's determined to control you. We went our separate ways and I headed inside. Mira was making coffee and the house smelled amazing. Path all clear? She asked. Clear and beautiful. Carter helped. That was nice of him. Everyone's been nice lately. It's almost weird, she laughed. You're not used to peace and quiet. Not after the past year. We sat down with our coffee, looking out the window at the snow-covered landscape. The path wound through it, connecting homes, serving its purpose. My property, managed my way, accessible to those who deserved access. You think Brenda ever understood? Mira asked. Why everyone turned on her? I doubt it. People like that rarely do. They think they're right. They think they're just maintaining standards, and they can't see how their behavior affects others. She thought she was a good HOA president. She probably still does. Probably blames me for her downfall, not her own actions. Her own actions did it, though. The embezzlement, the selective enforcement, the harassment. You just refused to be her victim. That was true. I hadn't destroyed Brenda. She destroyed herself. I'd just been the catalyst, the person who finally said no and meant it. Spring came early that year, melting the snow by mid-March. The path emerged from winter muddy but intact. Carter handled the spring maintenance as agreed, filling in potholes with gravel and making sure the drainage was clear. In April, Richard Sullivan's restraining order expired. He called me the next day. Henry, it's Richard. I know we're not friends, but I wanted to ask about an easement agreement. Like I said at Christmas, I'll pay whatever you think is fair. We met at a coffee shop in Burlington, neutral territory. Richard brought documentation about his property and a check already written out for $500. I figured annual fee first year upfront, he said. If that's not enough, I can do more. That's more than enough, I said. I'd been charging most people $200. Why so much? Because I owe you, not just for the easement, but for teaching me something. Brenda used to say that being tough on people was good leadership. But watching what happened, seeing how things improved after she left, I realized she was wrong. Being tough isn't the same as being fair. No, it's not. We drafted the agreement there in the coffee shop, with Rebecca reviewing it remotely via video call. Richard signed it, handed over the check, and actually smiled. Thank you, he said. Sincerely. You're welcome. And Richard, if you ever run for HOA president, do it right. Be fair, be transparent, and remember what it felt like to be on the receiving end of abusive power. I will, I promise. As spring turned to summer, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. A year and a half ago, I'd been miserable, harassed by an HOA president who seemed to have made me her personal project. Now I was comfortable, secure, and part of a community that actually functioned. The path remained central to everything. It was more than just a strip of land. It was a symbol. Of property rights, of standing up for yourself, of the difference between authority and authoritarianism. Every time I walked it, I remembered the snow that morning, Brenda screaming at me, the moment I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore. Jennifer stopped by one afternoon in June. I wanted to thank you, she said, for everything. For causing a huge mess, I asked, half joking. For exposing a huge mess. Brenda had been stealing from us for years. She'd been abusing her power, making people miserable. If you hadn't stood up to her, it would have kept going. Someone else would have eventually. Maybe. But you did it. You had the documentation, the legal backing, and the spine to see it through. The neighborhood's better because of you. After she left, Mira and I sat on the deck again, our favorite spot. The evening was warm, fireflies starting to appear in the yard. "You did good," Mira said softly. "We did good," I corrected. "You supported me through all of it. When I was stressed and angry and not sure if I was doing the right thing, you kept me grounded. That's what partners do." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. The path was barely visible in the gathering darkness, but I knew it was there. Clear, maintained, accessible to those who respected it and the person who owned it. That was all I'd ever wanted. Not power, not revenge, just respect and peace. And finally, I had both. The neighborhood continued to thrive. Property values actually went up once word spread that the HOA was well managed and reasonable. New families moved in, attracted by the community atmosphere and the transparent governance. Every new resident got a brief history of recent events, usually told by enthusiastic neighbors who were still amazed that someone had successfully stood up to an abusive HOA president. I became something of a local legend, though I didn't seek that status. People would introduce me at gatherings as the guy who broke the HOA, which wasn't quite accurate but was catchier than the guy who enforced his property rights and accidentally triggered an embezzlement investigation. By the end of that second summer, everything had found its equilibrium. The path was maintained, the easement agreements were working smoothly, and the HOA was functioning exactly as it should. Brenda Patterson was a distant memory, a cautionary tale told to new residents about what happens when power goes unchecked. I'd learned something valuable through the whole ordeal. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is draw a line and defend it, not out of spite, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect and a refusal to be victimized. Boundaries aren't walls meant to shut people out. They're definitions meant to show people how to treat you. And when someone crosses those boundaries repeatedly, when they ignore every warning and escalate every conflict, sometimes the only option is to use every legal tool at your disposal to defend yourself. That's not revenge. That's justice. As I looked out over the path one final time that summer, watching the sunset paint it gold, I felt satisfied. Not smug, not victorious, just content. I'd stood my ground, weathered the storm, and come out the other side with my dignity intact and my property secure. The path was mine. The neighborhood was healthy, and I was finally, truly home,